Learn how FAFSA completion is going to impact the class of 2021. The FAFSA is a critical milestone that dictates the likelihood that a teenager will go directly from high school graduation to a college campus. FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid, which is a form completed by current and prospective students to determine their eligibility for funding to pay for school. It is a vital piece that makes college a reality for millions of students. If a senior in high school completes the FAFSA, they're 90% more likely to go to college, compared to only 55% if they don't complete the form. October 1st is when the FAFSA opens up for families. However, COVID-19 has made it difficult for people to even think about the FAFSA as parents and families are dealing with short-term economic challenges. COVID may feel like a short-term setback to all of us, but for the class of 2021, there are some clear long-term disadvantages that if we do not start talking about the FAFSA pandemic, it can hit us at a national level. For the last 4 years, the National College Attainment Network has developed and maintained a weekly high school senior FAFSA completion tracker. And as of today, completions are down 16%. This amounts to roughly 140,000 fewer FAFSA completions than in the previous year. Now I reached out to Bill DeBond, Director of Data Evaluation at NCAN, who's in charge of the FAFSA tracker referenced above, and wrote a timely piece in the 74 that is linked in the description.
My big fear for the class of 2020 would be that it would be a lost class in terms of college enrollment, right? Because especially for students who are from low-income backgrounds, first-generation students, students of color, if we don't continuously enroll out of high school, then the likelihood of ever attaining a college degree decreases kind of substantially. Now, with the class of 2021, with FAFSA completions being the way they are, being even further down than they were for the class of 2020, it's an even bigger fear, right, that we're going to have a second high school graduating class that just sees markedly lower post-secondary enrollment and eventually post-secondary attainment rates. It's just a massive disruption to all the college and career readiness milestones that students typically have in high school. Those milestones kind of build on top of each other over the course of a high school career. And so this year's senior class, they had the back half of their junior year disrupted. Last year's sophomores now are having the entirety of their junior year disrupted. And there are so many college-going milestones in the junior year that we should really be worried that we're going to have a lot of students fall off track.
When Mr. DeBond starts talking about the lost class, it makes me think about Japan's lost decade, who were shut out of job opportunities in their 20s. This was a period of economic stagnation in Japan from about 1991 to 2001. The impact from the recession lives today in the cultural fabric of Japan, as many parents in their 80s who are receiving pensions are supporting their single children in their 50s who have experienced social withdrawal and been unemployed since their youth. They call this the 80-50 issue. Now, I'm not trying to be dramatic, and some of you might consider this a stretch, but we have to think of worst case scenario, especially when it comes to this COVID disruption on students. Having a college degree is an important credential to achieve employment success. In fact, most people who have a bachelor's degree have already recovered from the recession, while adults who dropped out or only have a high school diploma still have largely been unemployed. So if students do not complete the FAFSA and increase their likelihood of walking on a college campus to get that extra credential, we can be looking at a lost group of students who never find the confidence or the hope to see a path toward economic mobility.
When we look at FAFSA completions, we look at college applications from Common App, and we look at fall enrollments from the National Student Clearinghouse. All of those indicators are kind of pushing in the same direction, which is to say in a negative direction at around the same magnitude. So it's not just FAFSA completions that are down. There are also other indicators of college going that we're also seeing that are decreasing. The last figures I saw were that first year enrollers were down 16% so far this fall, but at community colleges, for example, their first fall enrollment is down 22%. And so given what we know about kind of the student population that community colleges are serving, that is particularly bad news for student groups who are underrepresented in post-secondary education in general.
Hanging out with Mr. DeBond and I too long could stress you out. So I reached out to people who always bring me comfort and assure all of us that everything's going to be okay. School counselors. Mr. Godinez is a counselor at Centennial High School in Corona, California, and president of the California School Counselor Association. I had a conversation with Mr. Godinez to get his take on the FAFSA completion numbers.
So the FAFSA completion rate is not alarming at this point. It's almost expected because it's following as another one of the casualties of the pandemic. Students, we are battling with their loss of motivation when things at home aren't changing. And so what we are consistently battling is helping them to see that light at the end of the tunnel. And one of those things is talking that post-secondary journey, which includes the FAFSA. And typically in a normal year, we're able to do family nights and FAFSA events, and we're running reports, and we're calling the kids into our offices, and we're sitting them down and working with them on the computer. Well, that can't happen in the virtual world. You are at the whim of whether or not they answer the phone, the parents answer the phone, you can get them on the Zoom, and they're motivated to even walk through it right now because so many of our kids are struggling right now with mental wellness and just getting through the academics of the day. So FAFSA to them is just one more added task, but we don't give up. We don't give up, and we continue to have family FAFSA nights virtually. We continue to reach out to our kids because our goal is to make sure that we meet deadlines for them because we know that we will come out of the pandemic. And when we come out of the pandemic, we want to make sure that they are set up so that they can see that life does go on.
Both Mr. Godinez and Mr. DeBon shared with me the success of virtual FAFSA nights. Mr. Godinez shared how they're working in his school, and Mr. DeBon shared how Broward County schools counselors in Florida have pretty much kept their FAFSA completion close to the same as last year, which is impressive for one of the largest school districts in the country. Another knot in this situation, as we discuss the uncertainty of this year, is not just the health pandemic, but the transition of power between the Trump administration and the Biden administration. There's so much still up in the air, from additional stimulus for schools to the Georgia runoffs and Biden's interest increase in Pell Grant funding for students. There's also this idea among students and families that a gap year will be okay. But the data shows that students who leave school and don't go right into formal education, coming back has a low likelihood.
Don't continuously enroll, right? They fall into either doesn't require a post-secondary credential or they can kind of get by without one, or they feel like they don't have the time to go back. They feel like they missed their window. And so those is a luxury that many of them just don't have, right? That's not what the reality is. So I think we need to be thinking of students and who's responsible for that. Because if you think about in terms of like accountability, that class has graduated, they're out the door. And so it's hard to hold districts and schools responsible for those students' outcomes at this point. At the same time, it could be hard for colleges to touch with them to engage them and say, hey, we have a pathway for you. And so there's going to have to be some coordination here between K-12, between higher ed, between community-based organizations, between policymakers to re-engage these students and let them know what their options are, whether that is a high-quality credential or an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, and let them know that yes, they face substantial interruptions when they graduated high school. That doesn't have to be the end of the story.
Now,
we will not know how the story ends until decades have passed, but states must take a lead in connecting students with virtual support services and help those who are triaging the support with the necessary data around FAFSA completion. We have to start making FAFSA completion a required outcome for schools to keep everyone accountable. Some states are already discussing making FAFSA completion a requirement in order to graduate. We also see districts investing in digital infrastructure that bridge K-12 schools to post-secondary institutions more cohesively. We still have time to make this story a happy ending, but for now, 2020 leaves us with a cliffhanger. Thank you for watching This Week in Education. Please subscribe and share your take on the FAFSA pandemic in the comments below.